What's going on, everybody? It is episode number 22? Is this
22?
20 fucking 2. My
Double
God. Yeah. It's we really got that far. I keep on doing that. Whenever I host, I go, I can't believe we made it this far. But I do feel that way. It's crazy we make it every single time.
It's a cycle of 3 for you, you know?
It is.
If you're moderating again, that's 3 more we've done. That's good.
It's wild. It's ludicrous. And sometimes after one of y'all hosts, mid-sentence, y'all are like introducing, I'll go, I can't, because it's true, like every single time. So it's really nice to say we've made it to 22. On this particular episode, I'll be hosting today. My name is Trevor. If you haven't watched before, on this particular topic, our question is, what is free will? What is it? What is this thing that we so often think of or refer to? And what's this thing that we encounter? What exactly is the space that we exist in? What's a feasible definition of free will? We'll talk about like what we mean by feasible, and then from there, is it compatible with what we understand to be the world? What presently is all around us? So that's the real question for this episode. So for this episode, we're doing something a little different. Microphone fix first, and then specifically what we want to do this episode. What I wanted to do this episode is to actually present something. I actually have a little like slideshow, only 2 slides, really quick, to do some basic introductions of some concepts that are floating around within like the field at large, within just discussions on free will. Specifically for this episode, I brought out a whole bunch of books. If anyone's in a philosophy course, I brought out this one, and then I brought out this one, and then I brought out this one. So I went through a lot of reading here. And I didn't read these whole, I'm sorry, but I did skim. And I went through, and there's this particular work, you can look it up, called by Randolph Clark, called Freedom of the Will. It's very short. It gives a basic introduction to free will, like the general discussion today. And then from that, I produced about 2 slides. So before we get started, and I just talk y'all's ears off and really try to get into this thing, I wanted to ask, maybe starting with Bray, if you might have a introduction, and see exactly how you feel. What is free will? Is there a tenable definition? And then furthermore, if you have the inclination, do we have it?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 22 of Four Mortal Coils. I'm glad there's so many good memes out there for numbers, otherwise we wouldn't have nearly as much fun. Coming up on a personal favorite of mine, you guys know, here in a couple episodes, we'll have another good round of episode 25 episode related memes. Anyways, what is free will? Do we have it? Let's find out. Free will, to me, I guess a good definition would just be something like the concept that conscious agents, thinking agents, can make decisions independent of external factors, perhaps, or internal factors. There's something to be said there. This is actually a topic that I have not spent. I don't know. It's a topic that I purposely do not spend a lot of time on, because I think at the end of the day it ultimately doesn't make that much of a difference to me and to people as a whole. Maybe on paper it's more important, but as far as practical life goes, whether or not I have free will doesn't really change a whole lot about how I operate. Like, if you told me, well, you don't have free will and here's why, and I believed you, it'd be like, well, I can't just like up and stop. That nothing fundamentally has changed about how I operate as a human being. And if you told me I do, well, hippity fucking do, like great. So, like I said, there's theoretical implications, I guess, but it's still fun to talk about. Do I think that we have free will? I used to think that we did, or at least it had it in some larger capacity. And then I discovered determinism and, hardcore materialism and physicalism, and everything is just physical particles or perhaps even bits. and we're all just moving through space really fast. And so I'm like, there's not much to suggest that there's good reason to believe that we have some sort of free will, or at least maybe not like the way that most people think we do, which I'm sure we'll get to. So my verdict is probably not, but maybe we fill some sort of weird, unique niche where we can influence our surroundings, but are ultimately kind of powerless in the things that we do. I'm not really sure.
Stellar answer. There we go. Very cool. Well, going on from there, I'd love to hear from Stephen. Exactly how do you feel? To repost the question for the audience, what is free will? Do we have it?
Well, welcome, listeners, brothers and sisters, fellow hominins all. We need you to do us another favor, right? Comment down below if you think we have it or not, and then see if your opinions change, right?
I can
So,
see a comment already that's like, well, duh, I have free will. How else would I make this fucking comment, you imbecile?
yo, no. So this is such a strange topic for me, and it's another one of these things that I've wanted to talk about for years, and I hope to convey that enthusiasm. I hope that you get on board with this. I hope it's contagious. Okay. What am I trying to say to begin here? Well, I've made a small habit of divulging a little personal information, so that's where I'll start. Telling you where I'm coming from. Okay. So, where did I rest on this question, say, 10 years ago? Right. Um, I, I was, 10 years ago, I was still at least in close proximity to the cult I was raised in. Okay. And it was a deeply fundamentalist Christian cult. And that being said, I've read the entirety of the Bible many times. I know it very well. Um, if you look at the Bible closely and you really think about, what is at hand in the story of the Bible, the mytho-historical accounts of what happened and so on, and even the way like the culture was around this monotheism, which of course that culture changed many times throughout its history. But they had a very deterministic view on things. More or less, if good things were happening, it's because we're with the deity. If bad things are happening, it's because we did something wrong. Okay. And so you got to think of it. You got to think of it like almost like Star Wars. I mean, to me, both of these have about equal evidence. You know what I mean? In Star Wars, if you are on the light side of things, you work within the will of the Force. If you were in the dark side of things, you don't work against it. You push it off. And the whole ambition of being in the dark side is to push it off indefinitely. That way you can do your own thing, type of thing. But it always catches up to you. You have to die at some point. And the same is true of the Bible. You have to die at some point. How can there be any argument against the determinism of the deity if he knows the hour of your death, right? If he knows the conditions in which you will die, or as it's said very commonly down here in the Bible Belt, and this applies to any of the monotheisms. If you have money, it's because God gave it to you somewhere, or maybe you stole it, or something like that. If you're poor, that's also because God, reasoned that you should endure poverty for some trial. We've all heard this nonsense about how God will not give you a task you cannot perform. Okay, and all of these things contribute to a deterministic attitude. I broke out of that, and it called into question everything I believed. Is there a determinism? Uh, you know, is there free will? And if an entirety of Christian communities cannot answer this question, and scientists cannot answer this question either, then we have no hope. But we can try. And that's what's important. And once again, we need your help. We need your help. You have to try with us. All right. Think about this deeply. Think about if you really feel you have a freedom of choice. To answer the question, what is it? First off, I take almost offense at what Bray said, right? Conscious agents independent of factors, both external or internal. We do not exist without external factors. We do not exist without internal ones. So I'm not sure what he means by that. I'm looking forward to finding out.
Me too.
Doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference. I took deeper offense at this. All right. So I would ask Bray. To that
He's
I would ask
laughing into his
Bray.
coffee.
That just
Right.
shows you how prepared I was.
Mm-hmm. To that I would ask
Cool.
Bray. If it doesn't make a difference, right? Evolution doesn't make a difference in your life at all. Would you rather not know about it? I would rather know about it. I would rather
Not the knowledge. I
understand.
just mean,
Yeah.
like whether or not I have, like, I feel like my life, if I have free will, and my life, if I don't have free will, are practically indistinguishable from each other. So that's what I'm saying is it doesn't really matter to me because I'm
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
I wouldn't be able to tell either way.
But let me put it this
there.
way.
I have to disagree, but we'll come
Well,
back.
see, this is the exact reason why I disagree. Okay, I'm going to use Richard Dawkins' language here. He probably did not originate it, but we have to get it in somewhere. Okay, doesn't make a difference. The thing I immediately wrote beneath that was consciousness raising. If you can raise your consciousness to the level of understanding evolution or understanding this topic of free will, you are better equipped. You are a better person. I really believe that. Okay. So even though I took offense at that, I still say, do we have it? Probably not. Probably the same argument that Bray made.
You and I aren't so different,
Yeah.
Spider-Man.
But you guys get what I mean.
Yes.
About probably not. It's very hard to say for sure one way or the other. But here's my initial thought. First, I wanted to keep my opinions unpolluted. I've got so many videos in my watch later list on YouTube about this exact topic. It's the Dr. Tyson debate with someone, I can't remember. And then there's a Michio Kaku debate, I think with Sabine Hassenfender or whatever her name is. Anyway, my point is all these really big science types. I'm waiting to watch them. And so I would actually like to invite my two co-hosts here to a part 2. We should do a part 2 on this sometime where we do research and see if
we
our
do
opinions
extreme.
change.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I really regret it that I didn't make the time for this, but this book right here, this particular anthology, Metaphysics, has an entire section of like 8 chapters at least, various sections on free will and its discussion, and there are entire sections on like quantum physics and why people usually go there whenever they explore the ideas behind free will, and also determinism. And this is whole by Barry. I'm going to say his name wrong. Lower, Loewer. Either way, whole sections.
Yeah, Lauer.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm really excited. If we come back to this topic, there's so much to explore, and it's really exciting.
For sure. And that's where I'll keep it there for now. I'll talk about some of the more fundamental beliefs I have later. And beliefs is a strong word, right? Inclinations, right? In other words, in the way of a scientific theory, a theory being an explanation. I have a few explanations, if that makes sense.
One thing I wanted to mention, I couldn't help but think this. When you mentioned like God bestowing like treasure or like wealth or not, I couldn't help it. I had a song click in my brain at that moment. What's that song? It's like, what would have been so terrible if I had a small fortune? And then,
oh, you're talking about if I were a rich man? Yeah.
All day long, it was literally racing through my brain. like a good 3 minutes there. But
Very monotheistic attitude.
very, very. And
we might have a good time sitting down together and streaming a debate video into like a chat room, and then
I'd love that.
offering commentary alongside.
That would be so cool. Like if we did a little homework before an episode, cut out parts we wanted to talk about, and just play them and say comment. That'd be cool.
It would. Well,
something like a really well put together one, like a monk debate and so on.
Very cool. I completely agree. And with that in mind, I'd like to really quickly, of the reading I did do some reading on this. That particular chapter I had discussed, Freedom of the Will by Randolph Clark. And I had read that specifically as a general introduction to the current discussion on free will, as a jumping off point. So, real quick, let's go ahead. Oh, very cool. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Chrome tab. Oh, very cool. Entire screen. I wonder if this will be like a...
While you
oh, there we are. Yeah, check it out. There we are. And then I'm going to switch screens to this. Yes. All right. Can you all see what I see? What is free will?
Oh, man, I feel like I'm back in the philosophy club.
Hell yeah. Except this time we have AI that does all of our shit for us.
It's not me grabbing clip art.
Yeah. This was,
although I gotta
generated
say,
this.
It's a place in my heart for the clip art PowerPoint presentation.
It's nice, but now we got robots that do it for us. Well, different types of robots, better robots, smarter robots, faster robots. Anyway, what is free will? As a general introduction, I wanted to really quickly just build the world that we're currently thinking from. So I had a couple definitions I want to lay down. If we have any questions, please interrupt me. And then from there, this is only 2 slides. We could open up the table a little bit. And specifically, I want you to keep in your mind.
Opportunity, Trevor. For those of us listening, if you ever want to join us live, I'm certain you can. We can put you in the audience, and even you could address questions if you like.
This is very true. In fact, we're going to start doing this now. Every episode, we'll be posting an event in our Discord, of all places. Disgusting. But you can go on there and click on the event link that we do on, at least at the moment, they're on Mondays, Monday evenings. You can click on that link and you can view us from the audience. You can watch all of our stuff live and post any comments that we'll see mid-episode, and we can see if we can address things. Or we could ignore you. It's up to us. Whatever else. And yeah, you can be part of the discussion. And we would be really interested to see what you have to say. So with that in mind, let's really quickly run through this. So speaking of free will, I first wanted to open the table as to something that Bray had just mentioned, funnily enough, of determinism. And basically, what is this purview that it's seemingly that all 3 of us currently exist within? All of us currently visualize this question of what is free will. Now, determinism. Just to open up the table here, the world is deterministic if the laws of nature are such that how the world is at any given moment fully necessitates how it will be at any other point. And then from a subset of that, you have another viewpoint called incompatibilism, the view that there can be no free will, no such free will within such a world. I'm going to break into a definition of free will a little later. We're doing this a funny little direction. Now, I got some modal logic here for anyone who likes modal logic. If anyone does not, I'm sorry. Here it is. So I'm just going to quickly break this down. But this is essentially the argument of being no free will within a deterministic world. Look at that. All right, so the square right there is basically necessitates, necessarily. So necessarily, P being all of the present moment, all of reality at a moment, and L being laws. All of physical facts at a given moment and the laws of the universe, whatever laws of nature there are, entails Q, that is to say, any given moment afterward. So if this is necessarily so, then there is no free will. If you can guess any moment, any consequences of these 2 things are in themselves predetermined. That's a deterministic world. So from there, I wanted to open up on a couple of things. So really quickly to just go through this, and this is the question I want to have both Bray, Stephen, both of y'all's minds, as well as the audience. What are you? in relation to these statements here. A determinist, that is to say, you espouse this point I've just given of the laws of nature. Are you yourself a determinist? Are you not? If you're not a determinist, in the span of this debate, you would call yourself a libertarian. Not in that sense.
Not in the government sense.
Yeah, not in the government sense. You're a libertarian in the sense of you deny the idea that the world is deterministic, that the laws of nature fully necessitate how it will be in a given point further. There's something else there, whether you say supernatural or something even more complicated than even that. So those 2 points of view. And then after that, you have 2 further points, which I opened up a little bit here with incompatibilism. Basically, do you believe if there is such a thing as a deterministic world, insofar as there is one, do you believe that it is compatible with the perspective on free will or incompatible? Now, here's what's funny. You can be a determinist and also be a compatibilist. That is to say, you think the world is determined, but also believe that there is such a thing as free will and that you do have it. You could also be a libertarian and also be a incompatibilist. That is to say that you are a libertarian and believe that determinism is incompatible with free will. Or you could be a libertarian who does not believe is compatible with free will. Is that?
Let me take a crack at this real quick to try and break it down in terms that everyone could understand.
What?
Let's do a small thought experiment with libertarianism and incompatibilism. For those of us listening, who might have some trouble keeping up. Trevor, I'm going to ask you a question about that. If I were a libertarian in the sense of free will, meaning that I believe that humans have free will, the statement would still be true that if even one person did not have free will, then that would be incompatible with the world.
Well, this is a bit complicated. So libertarianism doesn't necessarily entail any sort of relationship to free will. The question of free will. Oh, can y'all see my mouse? That'd be so useful. So this right here, this section is the conversation of free will. This right here, are you compatible? This is the free will thing. Over here is just the question of whether or not the world is deterministic. If the world is determined by the laws of nature.
Right.
Now, these two things are often synonymous and intertwined. But you could be a libertarian right here, and that doesn't necessarily entail a conversation on. Well, it does, but not necessarily within the purview of the question. Now, can I hear it one more time?
What I'm trying to say is that if you are libertarian in your sense of the individual, right, then you think that you have free will. Okay? And so if you have free will, then everyone else must as well. That would be a libertarian incompatibilist.
An incompatibilist would be someone who does not think that determinism and free will can exist at once. That would be a incompatibilist.
Exactly. In other words, a libertarian is someone who believes in free will. An incompatibilist would be a libertarian who thinks that it is set up in such a way that it can't be another way.
Incompatibilism would be a direct relationship to determinism. Both of these two things are a relationship with determinism. So basically, it's all relational to determinism. So if you are an incompatibilist, that's in relationship to your perspective of determinism. You can be a libertarian that is an incompatibilist. That is to say that you believe that determinism is incompatible with free will. That would be a libertarian incompatibilist.
Yep.
Cool. All right, just to lay it all out. And then from there, now I have the information here for free will. Now, here's the issue. The whole debate that we're having here, the whole conversation is what is free will. So it's a little bit funny to throw a definition up right now. However, I wanted to throw it up just as a general definition used by some people in the field to either add efficacy or tear down someone's preconceived notions. So at the very least, the definition used by Randolph Clark here would be free will being the ability of agents to choose or act in ways that are, quote, up to them. That would be free will. And then he gave some general attributes, such as like human dignity, moral responsibility, and a general openness to alternatives. These things are attributes or things that are often tied to free will whenever we have discussions of them in the field, whether they be philosophy or in general life. Now, going on from there, now that we've done all this stuff.
1 second.
Oh,
Once again,
please.
for our viewers, I want to break that down into a simple concept. And again, I'll pose it in a way of a question. For this definition to be true, right, we need to unpack the up to them part. And
Mm.
so could we not replace that with something easier for people to understand in a way of like, they have the ability to weigh options?
Whatever action is ahead of this moment, whatever it is contingent upon you.
Yep. Yeah.
Hmm.
But you get what I'm saying. Like, if
Certainly.
if we have, like, and you know, these are not exact definitions, right? These are things to help people understand what's going on.
That's
If we have
really,
the
yes.
ability to weigh options and act on any option we like, that must be free will.
Yes.
Good deal.
So really, the difficulty of this entire discussion, or really just any philosophical discussion, is that these are definitions brought to you not by God, but by Randolph Clark, and
Right.
that is the whole reason why we're meeting here today.
In other words, Randolph Clark is putting us in these boxes so that
Yes,
we
he
can
is.
have this conversation.
He gave us walls from which we can
Right.
develop more powerful walls. He gave us shoulders from which we can stand up on.
He
Scaffolding.
gave us the free will
Scaffolding.
to decide whether or not we have free will.
Yes. So from there, I have one more thing to list, and then this will be the end of my slides. So there's this argument. You'll notice this, anybody here that gets interested really into philosophy, once you start reading a lot of articles everywhere, and research papers, a lot of things start sounding like wizard spells in Harry Potter. I don't know if y'all know this, but like McTaggart's time A, like that sort of
Yep.
thing, or this or this or that and the other thing. So there's this one particular argument within the discussion of free will by initially created by a guy named Peter van Ingwagen, I think his name. It's called the consequence argument. It's these following statements. Insofar as this thing is sound and true, you can follow the therefore. So one, if determinism is true, as listed before, then the facts of the past and laws of nature determine every event, including human actions. Two, we cannot change the facts of the past. Three, we cannot change the laws of nature. Therefore, those three dots are a therefore signal, or symbol. Very nice. Therefore, we cannot change the consequences of these things. These things, that is to say, are human actions. The consequences of the facts of the past with the laws of nature are our human actions. And if you cannot change those things, you necessarily cannot do anything other than what the consequences of those actions are. And just like that, we find ourselves with a possible 4 different varieties of answers. Now, 5. You have 5 different approaches to what I just gave you before, what I just set before you. I'm speaking right now specifically to Bray and Stephen, but really anyone in the audience now, if you want to lay this into the comments, please. Are you A, determinist, B, libertarian, and then from those two, breaking into further subsets to create the 4. Are you a incompatibilist or a compatibilist? That is to say, are you a determinist compatibilist? Are you a libertarian incompatibilist? So on and so forth. Exactly how do you relate to these questions? And then number 5 being, do you completely negate the entire positioning of the system? Is it unsound? And then from there, we can explore that. And overall, that's the more fun thing to do.
We should quickly talk about what it takes to go down path number 5, just in general. For any of you listening, how can you use this in your everyday life, right? It's really important to know how logical arguments work. And I will not hear anything else. Okay. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've thought to myself, if a student of mine understood how to make a sound argument, then they would just get what they want. You know what I mean? Like, but they don't know how to. And it makes me wonder what the math teachers are up to. Makes me wonder what the English teachers are up to. But anyway, how do you do number 5, Trevor? Could it be said that if you can reject any one of the premises that you laid out, then you can take path number 5? You can say out with all of it.
Yes, if you can show that the overall statement of the argument, if you can show that the argument is unsound.
Exactly.
The argument is unsound. Therefore, you take number 5. You negate the entire position.
to give Hitchens a little, quota here. We got to keep our quota going.
Goddamn.
Remember, people, that which is submitted without evidence can be denied without evidence. In other words, if you don't like an argument, that is not enough reason to say it's not true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so going on from there, I think I'll go for Bray first since he spoke last,
Yeah.
or spoke anyway. Bray, exactly how do you relate to this? Which of these 5 avenues do you take?
The laws of the universe are determined. And based on that information, all right, I wasn't going to rant a little bit, but I'll rant a little bit. That'll probably be incoherent, babbling nonsense, and then we can rope it in at a time of your choosing here. So, the way I see it, the most clear part of all of this is that the universe is deterministic, meaning that, the Big Bang happened and everything, all of these laws of the universe have been defined from that very moment. And we've measured this. We know these things to be the case to whatever degree of certainty you want to call into question. And so how things act physically is determined. I think, and I would think that a lot of people would agree with that. I think where it gets fuzzy, where people start to think about, well, maybe there's free will somehow, is because human beings and other living creatures, we don't just sit around like, say, a rock or another piece of matter floating through space, or gases or stardust and all that stuff. We don't just obey our, movement from the beginning of time. We do things sometimes in opposition or in conjunction with these physical laws, or so it seems. And the reason that I say that is, if we take, for example, like me sitting down to do this podcast today, that may seem like a free action. Like I had a choice to do that, um, or even like to eat dinner about an hour and a half ago or so. That was a free choice. I could have chosen not to eat dinner, but I'm hungry. That was a factor contributing to my need to eat. If I don't eat, I will die. And then I will literally just be matter floating through space. But maybe I am still already just that, because at the end of the day, me being hungry is just a chemical process that's occurring in my brain, that's telling me that I need to eat something or I will die. And at their core, those chemical processes are physical. They are a bunch of, atoms of different chemicals and molecules all bumping up around in my head, because they were made that way by physical processes since the dawn of time, when everything went kaboom. So I think it's really where you draw a distinction. Like, I mean, when you think of it like that, it seems like everything, the universe is determined. We are in and of the universe, therefore we are just as determined, even though we've created this sort of anthropomorphic, godlike concept of, well, a literal god, and then also just of ourselves, that we somehow are extra special, and that we, our brain states or our ability for consciousness grants us some spot outside of the total control of the determined laws of the universe. And we think that we actually have some control over what we're doing. And maybe that terrifies some people, and they jump to a compatibilist approach, because they might say something like, well, if we don't have free will, then why are we locking people up? Why are we punishing people for their actions? And you know what I say to
Moral
that?
responsibility.
Because we have no choice but to do so.
So just so I understand, and I think I do, and just so that we make it very flat out, is that to say that the world is determined and you have no free will? That is to say, are you a determinist incompatibilist?
Uh, Probably, but I still live my life like I have free will, because I don't really I mean, it appears like I could just say I don't have any free will, but like, and then like go stupid, go crazy because I don't have free will, but then I would still just be doing what I had to do to begin with. So it's like you're kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing here. You get what I'm saying? Like if I woke up tomorrow with absolute knowledge that I had no free will, like okay, what could I possibly do that hadn't already been determined? It's like in the time travel movies, where like they do something. It's like in Interstellar, for example. Spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie, it's your fault. Uh, but like whenever he they have the whole plot of like him sending himself. It's like, and people don't understand that. I'm like, no, he has to send himself. Like he has to give the message to himself. Otherwise it doesn't work because he has to complete the if you send a message into the past, then it necessarily must be reciprocated in the future. It's like the oh gosh, I just had it and I just lost it.
A grandfather paradox?
Well, sort of like that. There was something else I was just thinking of that has to do with that, but like,
Like, is that the one
it,
where you're your own grandfather? That horrible
well, yeah. If
thing?
you if
No,
you went back in the
that's
past
part of
and
it. Yeah.
Ah,
it's part of it, yeah. But it's like, oh, that's what it was. It's like the concept that if time travel is in fact possible, um, in the future, for whatever reason, um, what you are experiencing right now would be what is happening. Like it would
They're past. Mhm.
necessarily happen. It's like in the Harry Potter movies when you're watching I think it's like the third one or something
The
like
time
that.
turner. Yeah.
You
Prisoner of
watch the
Azkaban.
film
Yeah,
in the linear fashion, and you
yeah.
watch them for the first time, like turn around and hear something in the woods, and
Hmm.
there's no context because it's happening right then. And then later on, you watch them fulfill that. Yeah.
Right,
So I
right.
mean, like,
It has to be a closed loop in the
Yes.
narrative sense, you know.
right.
Hmm.
And those characters, they had no choice but to complete those actions. People like in Interstellar, they say something like, well, doesn't he realize like he's the one sending the message? It's like, we don't get all the details because it's a movie, but yes, he must have necessarily forgotten that he was the one, or like that he had already seen what the message said, or it didn't matter in this moment that his daughter told him that the message said stay, and that he's about to do that out and Morse, or send out the coordinates or whatever. It's like he has to do it.
Hmm.
So
Very cool. Well, going on from there, Stephen, I want to hear what you think about this. Exactly what you said.
Yeah. So I said earlier that I would save a lot of my thoughts, and now's the time, right? So for me, it has a lot to do with like what level you're talking about. Okay. If we zoom out far enough, then what Bray has said is totally true. If we zoom out even just to like the planetary level, everything is determined. That is to say that you can build a machine, which we have done for hundreds of years now, to model the solar system. And it will more or less, I mean, predict exactly where the planets will be in 1,000 years or 1,000 years ago. That's my point. Even just at that level, you have to understand that everything is determined because they follow such lawful axioms of the universe. That is to say, they follow the natural forces of this universe. So, at what point zooming in, do we see this free will concept? Whenever we look at an ant colony, we perceive it as a bunch of individuals, but really it's not. These ants are eusocial. Their genome has provided for them that they will act as almost one organism. We do the same thing. We're an extremely social species. So I think that our free will idea in our head comes from a lot of that. Not necessarily a misfiring of like an evolutionary process. I wouldn't go that far, and is what I'm saying. I don't have that evidence. I'd have to do a lot more research to look into that. But these are just my thoughts. Once again, we must have this idea about God, about time, about ourselves, that somehow we have a kind of choice in the matter. And, it's extremely hard to quantify that. Like I said, at what level of zooming in do we see this free will business? Well, let's say we zoom all the way in. People go to like the quantum fluctuation type of thing. Whenever I hear people talk about quantum stuff, whenever we're talking about free will, I more or less can bank that they don't necessarily know what they're talking about. And what I mean by that is, if we uh, if we zoomed in on a single atom, let's say we could just go arbitrarily close to it, even though that's not possible. I won't get into why it's not possible, but you can't zoom in on an atom or an electron and determine everything about it. Well, if we were able to, we would see that there's a probability of things to occur, not a for certain thing. And people get hung up on that. But if you zoom out just one level above that to like a bunch of atoms working in concert, there's still a lot of probability at hand. But you just barely zoom out from that atomic level, and things start to really become a little deterministic. And what I mean by that is, the probability that this set of particles will do something becomes so like if you were playing dice, it would be like, it is so likely to land on 6 that you can pretty much say it's going to land on 6. The same way of this set of particles idea. If you zoom out far enough, just a little bit past the atomic level, those sets of particles just kind of start, moving like classic physics more or less, says they should. Okay? And these are observations. These aren't ideas. They can't be disproven. Or rather, they can't be they can't
Right.
be falsified. Y'all know what I'm saying. For the layman term, they cannot be disproven, because that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to falsify these ideas, but we can't. Every time I drop this pen, it will do a deterministic behavior. And so that's where I'm coming from on that one. I also have a deeply held belief that somehow we are writing, our conscious mind is writing the brain chemistry that we talk about. We are not necessarily the brain chemistry itself. In fact, I know we're not. Consciousness is an emergent property, and so must therefore free will be. These thoughts of free will come from the conscious mind. So it's tough. It's tough. If I had to put myself in a category, right? First off, I don't see how anyone can be a compatibilist or answer to compatibilism. I can see how they could do that zooming out trick I just talked about. Like if we do the planet and then zoom in just a little bit, we can see some fluctuations. That's okay. That's fine. But we're still not anywhere close to the atomic level. So I do not understand how someone cannot be a compatibilist. If they know enough about science and the natural forces, how can they not? And so it kind of leads me to believe that it is determined. If I had to put myself in a category, it'd be those two.
I see. So just so I understand, just to lay it out flat for both myself and also the audience,
Yeah.
both of y'all are what you would call a determinist incompatibilist. That is to say that you are a determinist, and you also believe that determinism is incompatible with free will. That is to say that the world is determined, and you do not believe in free will. You do not
Right.
believe it is such a thing.
And we can talk about what it would take to rupture that, right?
Yes.
If we could for sure point to a person, not necessarily me or you or you listener, if we could point to a person who had free will, for sure, then we would know that it can't be true, type of thing.
Yes. So this is an exciting moment for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I am not a determinist and compatibilist. I am something else, and I think that will open up. And at this moment, we can have ourselves a very insightful conversation,
Well, that's
or a
okay,
very
Trevor. You
curious
didn't have
argument.
a choice.
All right, that's pretty good. So a slight difference there. This is entirely due to the way that the positions themselves were aligned, how we gave the rules at the beginning, defined exactly what free will is, or gave a definition, that I have a different viewpoint. It's based on the exact definition that was listed there for free will. I am what you would call a determinist compatibilist. That is to say that I am also a determinist. I think the three of us, big surprise, are a bunch of filthy determinists. I think that was pretty much baked in from the get go, based on just our personalities and how this podcast has been going. But there's that difference there, and I want to explain exactly why I am a compatibilist. And just to reiterate, a compatibilist is someone who believes that free will is compatible with determinism. And furthermore, just to go even further from there, not only is it compatible, I do think it is true. I do think there is a form of free will that we have, but it's quite complicated. And this
So
is
we
what I
should
mean.
say something about this real quick.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, if I do not understand compatibilism well, then that could be the problem. You see what I mean?
Most certainly. Most certainly. This is the conversation. This is like, if anyone knows, a whole big thing that really changed philosophy in the last century was Wittgenstein. And he had an entire thing. He spent his entire life working on this, of how it's all just words, and a lot of philosophy is people just swinging past one another, and that's certainly true. That's certainly, for the audience members especially, that's certainly true, and that's something that always needs to be on the mind, and something that always needs to be mentioned and brought up and discussed. So, going from there, I wanted to list out my particular argument for compatibilism, my particular argument for free will. And as soon as I list it out, or maybe halfway through, I'd like for you all to interrupt me and see if you can tear it down. And I'm very curious.
I'm writing down. Don't worry.
Very exciting. Okay. So first things first, I wanted to lay out some of these definitions here, and why these definitions give rise to a compatibilist viewpoint that I have. So the free will definition that I had given thus far, and it could be unsound, so that's its discussion. But the definition that I had given was, for you have free will, or free will is the ability of agents to choose or act in ways that are, quote, up to them, where if an action appears, or like the next events are contingent upon their choice. That would be free will. So how can you have that and also exist within a determined world? That's the question, and that's what I'm saying here. That you can. What I'm saying, and what I'm saying here, and why there is such a thing as free will, and why you do have it, is well, first, I want to first open up a little bit as to how one ought to visualize the world in this sense, or at the very least, a different way of visualizing the world than you may have right now, listener. When people interact with the world, when they engage with the world, very often it's often from one of a passive observer, or someone who is over here or over there, and the universe is happening. The universe is here, and I am the observer of it, an interactor with it. I have a soul, and I exist with it, or I exist. I go through it, pass by it, or whatever it is. There's that sort of narrative that we sort of exist with. We have that narrative very often when it comes to like humans, or like the Homo sapiens species being this thing that is out of nature and exists out of the cycle and out of the ecosystem and sort of determines things. We have a lot of we presume a lot as humans that I think filthies up and ruins these sorts of, or not ruins, but negatively affects this discussion. I want to now pivot you for a moment and instead realize, or not realize, I speak with such high terms here when I shouldn't. I want you to think instead at this moment that you are not separate from the universe. You are of the universe. You are the universe. You're an aperture from which the universe looks in on itself. I've said this before. I think that that's an important perspective to have at this moment when we speak of free will. And with that perspective, I'll come back to the definition of free will, the ability of agents to choose or act in ways that are, quote, up to them. If, let's say, you have many avenues in front of you, like you walk up to that, I created this and then that robot model, that AI that drew that art for me, where you have like 3 different avenues to go from. You, the person existing within the universe. You can go with side A, you can go this way. B, you can go forward, or C, you can go right. Those are your options. And then after each one, let's say there are further perturbations on that. So once you go down A, you can then choose to go down path A for A, so AA or AB, AB,
And the
AC.
paths aren't mutually exclusive either.
In what
right?
sense?
So like a path on C could
Mhm.
eventually get you back to path A in some
Brilliant
way.
point. It's quite complicated. That's a good way. That's a good way to affect the toy model I'm designing here. It's or trying to point out here. It's a good point, and that's solid, and that definitely fits. So within this scenario where you walk up and you see 3 different ways, A, B, C, and then from that many other decisions, the choice is up to you at the same time that it's determined in this scenario. So think of it like this. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the essential point of my argument. These things are collinear. Your choice to do the thing is collinear with the determination of the thing. So the facts of the matter, like that modal logic that I had showed you, all the physics all the literal reality and the laws of reality that led to Q are true. And you're at this moment. Your choice as a piece of the universe, as an aperture from which the universe looks in on itself, is to go to A. And that's also the fact of the matter, the universe itself, the thing that is happening. So you both A, I should probably say not A because that's kind of confusing. You both 1, choose A, and 2, the universe is in such a way that you would choose A. And it's a point of perspective. So go back to our definition here of free will. The ability of agents to choose or act in ways that are, quote, up to them. It is up to you. You chose. It's collinear perfectly. It's perfectly collinear with your perspective within this deterministic worldview. It's that the universe is built in such a way that it couldn't be anything else. And also, you can't do anything but choose what you want to choose. I mean, it's anything
So
else is a
time out.
contradictory in nature
Time out.
or in logic. Yes.
I can see the look on Bray's face, right? And so I have like this idea that that we need to talk about. There's a principle of least action idea in science. Let me look up something real quick. But anyway, it sounds extremely like what Trevor's talking about. I want to make sure I get this right. So the idea behind the principle of least action, and Dr. Sabine, whatever her name is, on YouTube, actually did a wonderful episode about this.
Oh, I have a friend of mine who's friends with her. I was going to bring that up. Like, what
that
a
is so
coincidence.
cool.
Oh, it's so cool.
My
Here in
Sabine
Berkeley,
number
yeah.
is at least 1, 2, 3. You know what I mean?
That's
you know what I'm talking
it.
about?
Yeah, the Michael Jackson thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so the principle of least action is just this idea that whenever we throw a ball, like if I were to throw a ball from me to Bray, if we were in the same room, of course, and you have to ask yourself, okay, why didn't it try a whole bunch of paths to get there? Why didn't it move around in paths to eventually get to Bray, right? Why did it only select the one true path from me to Bray? Why do why do light rays bend whenever they see another medium, right? And I'm trying to think of another good example. What Trevor's talking about here is also a good example of maybe that's how it works. The collinearity of your choice with the fact of the universe may coincide in this principle of least action, but I doubt it. All right.
So, well, here's the way I wanted to frame it, and why I spoke at the beginning of as the universe. So you first, when you think of like, I don't have free will, you're like, oh, my will is gone. It's just up to the universe. The universe is what it is, and that's it.
But that implies that there's a consciousness other than your own in the universe, and that's not true.
That's also not true. But I'm trying to say, like, it's just up to things that are outside of my own control.
Right.
That's what
I just wanted to make it clear.
Please, yeah, thank you. So it's outside of my control. That's what you usually feel when you sit when you surmise that you don't have free will. When you take the assertion. Yes. So you that's usually how you feel. I mean to say at this moment, and the whole point of this argument, it's not so much collinearity. That's a good way to visualize it, but that's not all that it is. It's more than that. It's to say that the universe acting in the way that it does, in that completely non-conscious sort of way, or however you want to say it, just the state of affairs acting the way it does, includes you, listener. You are a subset of that universe acting in its way. I mean to create a universality, a bond between you and the universe that you are in. Sure, the universe does what it does, and it's due to what came before, and also the laws of nature, caused all the way from the Big Bang, not caused by the Big Bang, but since then the laws, and then up till now, all of the state of affairs. I mean to say that you are a subset of that universe, and in that way, you do, as a subset of that universe, have free will in that moment. You can visualize it in terms of collinearity. That is to say, like, everything you would have done is the thing that is the state of affairs. But I mean to transcend that a little bit, and just to say that the universe doing its actions is itself you doing those actions. This is itself up to you. It is up to you at that moment, and by that I mean to establish free will.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around where the actual like power of the individual comes into play, because it seems like you're like, okay, so we've got the fact of the universe, and then we've got the actual like the will of the individual, and
Yes.
those can appear collinear.
It's not. It's more than that. That's to say that your will is a subset of the universe. Your will is one with the universe.
But we could say that, and that's like descriptive, but how could we possibly know that? This is what I mean by whether or not I have free will. The two seem to be indistinguishable, because how could I know that my wanting to go to the movies on Friday was actually my own conscious choice, or if that was just the will of the universe?
Well, this is what I'm trying to say. Those two things are the same thing. You just said the same thing twice. You are a subset, an aperture from which the universe looks in on itself.
Okay, but then does that not just paint compatibilism as determinism, or like as?
So that's my point. I'm a determinist compatibilist.
I was hoping Ray would bring this up instead of me, but it really feels like this is just indeterminism dressed up real nice.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, it most certainly is
doesn't...
deterministic. I mean, that's the thing.
Where is the actual free will part of it?
Yes, the free will. Thank you. That's a terrific question. Yeah. The free will part of it is, insofar as the definition of free will is the following: the ability of agents to choose or act in ways that are, quote, up to them. Insofar as that is the definition of free will, you do have free will, because it was up to you. You can look at it in terms of collinearity. It's a much stronger position to look at it from collinearity.
Well, but you're also just labeling me as the universe.
Yes,
because which I think
you most certainly.
Well, I feel like there's an issue that I totally agree with you on that, but I mean, as far as the actual argument goes, like I feel like there's an issue.
If you
can the universe have free will if it's determined by the physical laws that
was it up to the universe? Was it? If it was up to the universe,
so
the universe could not have chosen to not
the universe.
The universe has no will. I mean,
the universe most certainly does have a will whenever it occupies the confines of Bray as person, his entity. That most certainly does carry will. That's the aperture from which the universe sees itself. I use that term often because I find it quite important.
Would a rock have will to just sit by a stream?
Well, that's just an abstraction. I'm talking about you. You're a sentient life form. That's
Am I
different.
not an
Well,
abstraction?
what he's saying,
of
Bray,
For me, you are. I'm talking
Much
about
more-
you. The somethingness which it is like to be Bray. Like there is a
What-
somethingness about you.
what
There's
Trevor's
a
trying to say, I believe, is
experience.
that a rock, right,
Mhm.
Yes.
does not have a say,
Hmm.
and neither do you. But both of you are part of the universe.
Hmm.
So within the confines of the rock, there are no internal things that could change its behavior. In your internal confines, there are things that can change your behavior, but both are still subsets of the universe.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And therefore they are outmatched by the physical laws that
No,
govern
no, no. You've
everything about
separated
them.
it. No, you've separated. It's not outmatching. It's just ofness. You are inside the universe, not separated from it. You're a subset. You are one part of the larger whole, and that one part, you choose to do all of these things. When you choose to go down A, you chose to go down A.
Okay, I gotta pull out the trump card. If it's all physical, if
Yes.
everything is governed by physical laws of the universe, because the
Yes.
physical is all that there is,
As is
Correct.
your will.
how
Yes.
could anything possibly not just go by as those laws determine it from the beginning of time?
They can't. They can't. That's my point. They can't.
Then that's what I'm saying, is that even if you have the
But you can't. You
appearance,
couldn't have chosen any other way. That's my
hey,
point.
that's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. No, there's what I mean. You cannot do anything other than the things that you want to do.
But
That sounds a little
compatibilism would
silly. It's
suggest
circular.
Let me bring up
Yes.
something
Please.
to break us out of this, right? I have a
Please.
big question for Trevor to.
I'm suddenly reminded why I hate the free will test. I mean, this is great, but I mean, when you're talking to people who like you've just met and you're
Yes.
like, let's talk about free
Yeah,
will.
That was
you
always.
can't
I
do this to
love
people
that.
you
That
just
was my
met.
favorite part. We argued
And that's
so
why it's
loud.
episode 22.
Because
right?
it's
Yes.
quite literally like this. It's just, but it's this way. No, it's this way.
Okay.
Well, we're trying
So-
to. We're butting heads, trying to reach something. You know, it's good. Please.
I had a big question.
And then Bray interrupted.
Hmm.
Was it my will to interrupt, or was
No, it was. It was. It most certainly was. It was both your will, and there couldn't have been any other way. It was your will. It couldn't have been any other way. You got what you wanted, and you could do nothing but get what you wanted. Does that make sense?
I don't
You got
like
what
it.
you wanted. You went to McDonald's, and you got exactly what you fucking deserved, and that's going to McDonald's. That's what I'm saying.
Free
I'm
will
saying
and determinism as colorized by
It's like this.
2000 and
Yes.
Joker.
Let's colorize that toy model a little bit, because that's what I wanted to do. Your choice, Bray, in this scenario, in this toy model, was to do A, B, C. That was your choice. So A, B, C. You wanted to go down A, followed by B, followed by C path.
Okay, I get what you're saying now. You're
Yes.
saying we're both
what I-
trying to say the same thing here, because you're saying what my
Oh.
wants are
Yes.
the
perfectly collinear.
are determined by chemical processes in my brain
Yes, it
that
is
are
up to you.
collinear with
Yeah.
the universe, because
Okay.
I am in and of the universe.
So this is what I want
Yes.
to talk about. Look. A big hole I could potentially put in this argument is
Please do.
what if. Okay, so for example, Richard Dawkins believes that a belief in the deity is a misfiring of one or more evolutionary processes, or like, in other words, a false positive belief. Dear listener, if you can think of a false positive, it'll be this one.
Hmm.
You're in your room at night, and you look over on the chair, and you think it's a demon, like Satan is in your
Or sitting on your chest, and you
place.
can't move. Yeah.
And then you turn on your light, it's just a pile of clothes. That is a false positive. And so in his book The God Delusion, he proposes that God is a false positive in this way. All right? These are broad strokes, people. Go read the book. All right? So if we're willing to entertain that idea, we should be willing to entertain this one. What if Trevor's argument here is a very cool and neat misfiring of evolutionary processes
Yeah.
that make us just believe that we have free will? In other words, this collinearity is not exclusive to just believing we have it. Okay, and that honestly would be my biggest rebuttal to this argument, is that you could not distinguish the two from each other. What if this wanted to do that you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about in your argument was literally just your brain feeding you information saying you wanted to do this? You sure did.
I am so glad you brought that up. I am so glad you brought that up. I had a discussion just about this about 2 weeks ago with a friend of mine. I should probably make up a name. Fuck.
John
Let's
Doe.
call him Tim. His name's not Tim. Close friend of mine I made in the philosophy department around here where I'm from in the Bay Area. I was talking to him about concepts and essentially what the brain does in relationship to what it actually does and wants.
Yes.
There's this book. There's this YouTube video that you can watch. Any of y'all can go check out. It's called "You Are Too" by a guy named CGP Grey, I think. CGP Grey, something like that. He does a lot of smart intellectual sort of things, and also does like a bunch of stuff on Lord of the Rings. Takes a lot to make the world. And this particular topic, "You Are Too," was a discussion on the brain. It was insane, incredible story. If you want to learn more about this, first off, specifically about the brain, it was about people who have had their corpus callosum split. Now, if you
Yes.
don't know, the corpus
The bottom
callosum
eyes.
is
Yes,
yes,
I'm familiar with this.
it's a sliver of brain that connects your left and right hemisphere. It's not the only place that it's connected, but
Extremely
that's one of.
important.
Very important. And these people have it split for all sorts of reasons, especially back then. It was for the reason of a lot of people with epilepsy, in order to not have like a full epileptic attack, would take the epileptic area of the brain and basically hide it or split it along the hemispheres so that the other half of the brain would be unaffected. That was one of the many reasons why someone would have the corpus callosum split. So these people, and he talks about this. It's very interesting. And if you want to learn more about this, there's a special book I like called "The Master and His Emissary" that explores a lot of depth. A very large book, but worthwhile. By what's his name? Not Darmaid McCulloch, because that's the guy who wrote about Christianity. What's it called? You can find his name. He has a name just like that. And a brilliant book. And this is the phenomenon. Incredible phenomenon. These people will be walking along the store in the aisles, and as they're walking, without thinking about it or without really wanting, their right hand would reach for like a snack of some sort and just put it in their basket. And they go, "Oh, I don't want that," and they take it back out and put it back on the thing, and then the hand would reach and grab it again. This was a very interesting phenomenon. So they would take these people, and this is where it connects to this point, the reason why I wanted to bring it up. It certainly pertains. They took, as part of a research study, these people were taken, and they were given goggles where it like separated their eyes, like this, where like your right eye can't see what the left eye sees.
I think I've seen something about this before.
It's a brilliant YouTube video. It's a brilliant study. It's insane, the results. They would sit these people down on a table, and they had on the right a little terminal, a little screen that would like give commands, like little prompts, and on the left just like various things, like various objects, like a blue sphere, a red cube, those sorts of things, and a prompt would appear on the right terminal, something like pick up the red cube, just pick up the red cube, and then that person would pick up the red cube, and then a scientist, a guy with a clipboard, or a lady with a clipboard would turn and then ask this person.
Stereotypical.
You got it.
Yeah, Fallout scientist, literally.
Yeah, with a white
Right.
or a white lab coat. Yeah, and would turn and go, "Why'd you pick up that red cube?" And this person would turn to them and go, "I've always loved the color red." Isn't that insane? Do you realize what that means? This person's logical thinking was completely disjointed from their actual actions.
Or at least
they were
inhibited,
told, at least
right?
in this sense, yes. In this sense, basically the logic, or not the logic, but the language patterns of the brain, the patterns of the areas of the brain, like Broca's and Wernicke's areas, were disjointed and disconnected from the thing that actually did the thing. So it saw the words "pick up the red cube," and it did. And then the person was asked, "Hey, why'd you pick up that red cube?" They gave a reason for why, a claim for why that was completely not related to why they did it. They just said that they like the color red. They have always liked the color red. And that is horrifying because
It's
it
almost
completely,
like they
yes,
became permeable to suggestion. You know what I mean?
certainly the reason why I bring it up, is to say that these people reveal that the logical reasons, like the reasons for why you believe these things, are useful, kind of like an epiphenomenon. It happens after the fact. Your structure of reality, just like an emergent property, is something you exist with. But the reasons for why you do things is uncorrelated, or at the very least, not directly tethered. So you could have things like certain perspectives as to why you do this or why you do that, but it could be completely disjointed as to why you actually do them. Like, for example, I could like list reasons as to why I hate this movie, and then like there are better reasons. Now, this is a really horrible. That's a really horrible example because it's really quite complicated, and quite more so than like saying that there's a real reason for anything, but or like a solid, consistent, real reason for any one particular item. That's not really quite the way you should look at neuroscience or the brain. But I do mean to reveal to you that your conscious, your qualia of your experience and your argument as to why something is may not necessarily be tethered to what actual reasons are for why it is, why you've chosen for what is. And that's why I brought that up to connect to this point that Stephen had mentioned. The idea that what it is that you say may be disjointed from what actually is a statement of fact of who you are and your nature.
Perfect segue.
Yeah, and you make a very strong point, but I don't think that directly interrupts the idea of this compatibilist determinism. If you define free will as it is quote up to them, in the sense of my experience of reality, the phenomenology of it. That is to say, listener, if you don't know, the felt experience, the felt emotion of the moment. If you engage with that person, that Trevor, the person you're speaking to right now, the two of you speaking to me, it was up to me. It was. If given the let me go back to the toy model. If I first and foremost, here's the toy model. I would choose, if you asked me, I would go down A, then B, then C. Also, the universe is set in such a way where it could be nothing but A, then B, then C. There's no other way. It's both my choice, and there's no other. It's just like trying to say that I could not, like, you can't choose something you wouldn't have chosen. Like, I can't choose to shoot my friend in the face as I wouldn't choose to do that. And at the same time, the universe was built in such a way that that couldn't have happened. They're collinear perfectly.
Well, that's where my problem is that the universe has existed before us, so we are temporally bound by it, and the collinear thing draws issues for me there. It's like maybe if by some chance we came into existence at the same time as the universe, whatever that would look like, then maybe. But I even know what that situation would look like. That's just complicating it. But like, that's how I used to try to explain it to people. I was like, if we could go back to any time in your personal history, to any choice, I always tried to get somebody to choose like a big decision that they made. That way, it was a little bit easier to look at something than something mundane. And I was like, if we could go back to that and all of the conditions were
Like going to
exactly
school,
the same,
something like that.
right? If we could go back to that exact moment, could you have chosen something else? And some people will say, well, yeah. And I'm like, but you didn't. You chose what you did for multiple reasons and factors,
The way I
all
like
of
to say that,
which
Bray, for
are
people,
physical.
like one day your future will be your own past or someone else's past.
Right. And
So
we can't change the past.
No, we can't.
And
Yes.
we can't, we can talk all day about these sort of thought experiments. Like, well, if we could have gone back and could we have done something differently? There's no way we could possibly ever
The permutations
demonstrate that
are
we
absurd.
could have done something differently.
Yeah.
Which
That's
again
yes.
is why I say at the end of the day, to me, it just really doesn't matter whether or not we have it or not.
So So this is one of those things that's really quite concerning about this whole discussion of free will in this way. So I think we listed out here just now, like what we listed out, like what you just listed out, was a whole lot of determinism, and that's something that the trio of us will perfectly agree on. The three of us are determinists. I don't understand anywhere other than the stardust and the matter of fact, which is reality, that I can derive influence from. And another thing, this is completely tangential to what I'm trying to say, but one thing I don't understand about the argument that quantum mechanics can lead to free will is like you had no choice over the randomness as well as the order. I don't see how you can derive an argument for free will out of just adding randomness that you also had no choice over. Very
It's not.
strange.
I really.
Very strange.
I'm not an expert on quantum mechanics, but
I have a friend of mine who is. That's fun about being
there
at
you
a
go.
university
And we
at this.
should
I should go grab him.
Get them to weigh in on that. But look, I have received quite a bit of training in quantum mechanics, and I have done quite a bit of research on my own. And so I can tell you that that's kind of an assumption that I make whenever people talk about this. My assumption is usually you don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I wait for that to be dispelled, in other words. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that setting that tangent aside, so it sounded like we listed a whole lot of reasons for determinism, but I mean to say, and here now, when we talk about the definition of free will, the ability of agents to choose or act in ways that are up to them, there's a whole lot of things in life that aren't up to me. That is to say, that I really wish that I could have 1,000,000 bars of gold and invent time travel and then travel to the stars and then like create a clone of myself and then make out passionately with it. I don't know. Whatever it is you want to do. But I don't have these powers. I can't do these things. So this is one of those things where a lot of the time, contextually, this is one of those things where I like to think of it as a thought artifact. One of those things where,
Thought object, you know what I mean?
one of those things where I have this fear, but a lot of the ways that I conceive of reality, listener, voice crack, a lot of the ways that I abstract reality are based upon presuppositions from the context of my being. That is to say that I grew up in a Christian society, which has derived a lot of its philosophy from Christian philosophy. And just like that, you can kind of get an understanding of why we have this hankering to talk about free will. It may not necessarily be something worth thinking or discussing. It's just a contextual artifact created from the idea that the Lord bestowed us with free will. The boss said so. One of those things. And I worry very often that these are contextual issues. It's something that wells up from our context. And once you rivet it to what you would call the physicalist, the deterministic physical world, you find that it's quite confusing and hard to fit it. Because if I were to ask, like, do I have free will, to the almighty knower, the knower of all knows, it'll turn to me, and it'll say, I don't really understand your point. You can't fly a spaceship. You don't have the spaceship. Like there are things that are outside of your control. And then I go, well, I mean, like, can I do what I want given this scenario? And he goes, yeah, but you just set up the rules of the scenario. I mean, you kind of just it's hard to explain. And would you have chosen any other way? It'll ask me, and I go, no. And then that's when I would say at that moment, at this discussion here and now, trying to make it tenable, that if at this moment I'm given a choice between A, B, and C, and I choose A, and that's necessarily collinear with the way of the universe, I don't see that as being anything other than perfectly collinear between my will and the universe itself. But that's within the confines of the issue that there are many things I don't have control over. I can't fly a spaceship at this moment. I can't suddenly wish myself to be on a spaceship at this moment.
Let's think about it
I
this
can't
way.
undo my own death.
Let's think about it this way, Trevor. Would it be cool or neat to kind of like polish off this idea of yours to say that in front of me there are a set number of paths, right? I don't know what those paths are, right? But if we can generalize some of the choices I would make, those would constitute bifurcations in paths or trifurcations or whatever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's take an extreme example, right? Let's say that you are thinking about what you're going to eat for lunch. And you have taken a lot of drugs and you think you can see the paths in front of you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you know what I mean? You take a lot of spice melange and you can see what's going
Yes.
on. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And so, suppose that the paths in front of you, you can see them. You're trying to consider what to get for lunch. You look and you see, oh, I've only got one path. I thought I had many. Well, it turns out you got shot today. You know what I mean? At some point along the lines, you got shot and you're not getting lunch at all. Okay? In other words, what I'm trying to say is, could it polish off this argument of yours? Could it polish off the idea of yours that you have to play by these other rules? You know what I mean? Like whenever it's time for them to come along, your path is kind of set. You know, and not to say that it can't be unset, right? Because you literally told us it's deterministic, but maybe some factors limit the number of paths you can take, is what I'm really trying to get at. In other words, in no
Oh,
circumstance do you
sure.
have an infinite number of paths in front of you. Would
Mm-hmm.
that make it better?
Yeah, that does help illustrate it a bit, because it's hard to make that distinction between things you have control over and things you don't have control over when we talk about being in a deterministic framework. Because that distinction, because I was trying to say, well, what's to stop me from getting shot, or what are those things that prevent me from getting what I want? And then suddenly you go, well, what are those things? You flip the whole thing on its
Right.
head when we talk about deterministic frame view. So that does
What
help.
we
It
really
does.
need to talk about is the lessons of Vivek, when he talks about the different walking ways. You know what I'm talking about? Anybody?
I don't. What's this?
No? Okay, so Michael Kirkbride, pretty sure that's his name, who designed a lot of the lore for Morrowind,
Oh, all
is
right.
is
Yep.
responsible for a lot of the lore of like the entirety of Elder Scrolls. And in Elder Scrolls, they have a very Gnostic idea about what the universe looks like. And he talks about the 6 walking ways and shit like that. It's pretty cool. You should look into it. It goes heavy into what we're talking about right now. It's actually pretty cool.
This is great.
Um, but yeah, anyway.
All right. Well, going on from there, I wanted to ask, or go ahead and wrap it up. Real quick, as a preemptive, this is going to be a two-parter, not necessarily in a row, but we are going to do a second one. Really exciting. So let's start with Stephen this time. Do you have some sort of good synopsis to wrap up for just part one, and maybe something preemptive for part
Yeah.
two?
So, people, I'd like to reiterate that I completely disagree with what Bray said earlier, right? Shit does matter. Okay. I mean, no, seriously, like, what do I mean by this? Of course, in your daily life, you should not be thinking about Rome. All right? You should not be thinking about uh you should not be thinking about free will, okay? That's what we call neurotic. All right? And you can't do that. All right? You do have to find a time and a place for this sort of thing. And that's what I really want to say, is that this is our time and place to do this, including you. You're listening. So deterministically you had to be here, listening to it and so on. And so this is our time and place. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from each other. We want to know. All right. And like I say, this is an exercise in raising your consciousness. You'd be so surprised, people, how, like, when you do that in your life, how much more attention you pay to the things that really matter around you. All right. So in a very egotistical way, think of this episode as a very big thought experiment, if nothing else, that will help you in your everyday endeavors. Take care.
Beautiful. This is our time down here. All right. It was a Goonies reference, but Bray, going on from there, do you have yourself a some sort of wrap up for this topic?
Yes, nothing matters, and we're all gonna. No. Yeah, no, I mean, I still kind of, I feel the same way. Like, I eventually came around to understanding what you were trying to say, Trevor, and I understand the importance of people. Me saying that we don't have any free, anybody saying, unless it's like the president. But then again, who's real at this point? Who really listens to the president anyway? you know, if any one person or collective group of people, like I guarantee if an article came out in the biggest news publication in the world tomorrow that was like, you probably don't have free will, nobody would give a shit because they still feel like they have free will, and that's enough for people. You know, we have the appearance that we have free will, and I just don't. I feel like it's one of those weird, like maybe the only niche thing other than like us presupposing that like we're not all a brain in a vat kind of deal
You know,
is like one of the only handful of things that we all just do in spite of what maybe, you know, minimally demonstrable or speculative or whatever. That's why I say it just really doesn't matter, because people are going to do whatever they want anyway. But it's an important thing, I think, to peruse and ponder over, and kind of come to terms with. It's funny enough, you know, as somebody who would be, you know, militantly anti-religious, that I actually have not considered the religious aspect of this when we talked about free will. I didn't even think
Good
about
point.
that until you started speaking on it, Stephen, and I was like, oh yeah, I forget that's like a critical part of, you know.
and no one can agree about it. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got
Oh
the
yeah, I
Calvinist
mean,
here and the
if we had just spoken about purely the religious, you know, that would have been, well, we're done, you know. That's no, it's not possible in the way that these things are
But like I
traditionally
say, you'd be
defined.
so surprised on how many of these Christian denominations and Jewish sects and different belief systems, they have totally different answers on whether or not it's predetermined.
Right.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so my message to close then is that, you know, continue to live your life like you always have, under the impression that you have free will, because you don't have a choice in the matter to do so. And we'll all keep going on and doing what we think is in our best interest or not. We really won't know. So smash that thumbs up and subscribe button,
Yeah.
because
Put some comments down below.
to
I'm going to
demonstrate,
anyway.
to rebel against determinism, show that you will, you know, smash that thumbs and subscribe button,
Yeah.
because you probably wouldn't have done it otherwise. So now,
I
you know,
really wish there was a button out there that was just represented the feeling of, you know, you
yeah.
get a whole bunch of those. Anyway, wonderful, very cool. Audience members, all that kind of stuff. Please, once again, put a thumbs up, comment, all that kind of stuff. I have been Trevor. This has been episode 22 of Four Mortal Coils. Don't forget to be excellent to each other, as our residential Stephen has often said, and it's a beautiful statement, and I'd like to repeat it. And we shall see you next time, next week on Mortal Coils.